You know, guys, I was sitting here thinking about the way things used to be, and it's amazing how much things has changed. I remember back when I was in my early 20s, I lived on what is called John Ryan's Mountain here. It was a old home place up on Tennessee Kentucky state line. I was about probably less than a half a mile from the Kentucky state line. And the old house I lived in had upstairs, but it wasn't nice or anything like that. It had electricity, but had no indoor plumbing. It had a well outside with the pump that you had to pump the well water. It was 170 acres actually, and had a fireplace for heat. I lived up there for about 2 years, and I was thinking about that place and thinking about the way things are now, and it's so extraordinary how much things has changed. I mean, I'm 52 years old now. When I first moved up there and lived up there, I was in my early 20s. And the world has changed dramatically. It's amazing at everything going on now. I mean, when I lived up there, things were more simple. I didn't have a lot. You know, I have more now. I have a bigger bank account now. I mean, I have more things now. I have a property that's paid for now. I was actually renting that property, and I paid $50 a month rent. My electricity bill up there was $15 a month. No water bill because there was no water from the utilities. But I would go out. I would hunt for food a lot of times. I would hunt squirrels. I would hunt rabbits. I mean, I killed everything with a Ruger 7722. That was a very accurate firearm, and I wish I had that rifle back. I mean, I don't know why I ended up selling that for, but I did. Some things you look back on and you're like, why did I do this for? I mean, really. But, I heat it with a fireplace, and I actually lived in one room. The house had three large rooms downstairs and had two rooms upstairs. But the rooms upstairs wasn't really finished or anything like that. I mean, they were really basic. Downstairs, I had a kitchen, I had a living room, I had a bedroom, but I actually lived in that one room because it's where the fireplace was. And during the wintertime, it was a cold house. There wasn't any insulation inside the walls because the house is like 110 years old then. It's burnt down now. Actually, what I heard was some meth heads had set up shop there and was making meth and caught the house on fire. So the house is gone now. But the last time I went through there, the chimney was still up. So it had the fireplace was made into it and the chimney came up. The old guy that lived there, John Ryan, he actually lived to be, I think, in his 80s. And he had a reputation of being a hermit and being a miser, trying to squeeze that money, squeeze that dollar. And he lived there, as far as I know, all of his life. And he was so stingy that he had a little truck. I can't remember if it was I think it was a Ford Ranger. I could be mistaken, but I think it was a Ford Ranger. He was actually friends with my grandpa when he was still alive, and they would hang out together up there. But anyway, he was really, really stingy. He was a tightwad, and he would take that truck he had when he went to the store and things, and he would put it in neutral and coast down the hills to save money on gasoline. He was a tightwad, and he would do things like that. He grew most of his own food. He had honeybees. He had chickens. He had an orchard up there. I mean, when I lived up there, there was a lot of apple trees. There was a pear tree. There was a cherry tree. And I remember one year, actually, when I lived up there, that the cherries were getting just ripe. That cherry tree was loaded with cherries, and it was getting ripe. And one day, a bunch of blackbirds came through and wiped that out within, looked like 10 minutes. I mean, I came home and there were still a few there, and the blackbirds was there, and they had wiped that tree out of those cherries. I had chickens when I lived up there. I had some horses when I lived up there. The closest neighbor is actually about a mile and a half away, and it was actually pretty awesome. It was quiet. I mean, it was really, really quiet. I actually had a couch on the porch, a couch like this one on the porch, and I would go out there and I would lay on that couch sometimes. I'd actually go to sleep on the porch as how quiet that it was. No one around. The closest neighbor was down the hill a mile and a half away in Kentucky, actually, and it was pretty awesome. It really was. I had the chickens and the horses and things. It was peaceful, and it's amazing when I think back how much things has changed. I was young. I felt decent. My grandpa was still alive. Dad's still alive. Change. We have to learn to deal with things. And it's difficult sometimes. It really is. You sit and you think about it. If you let it, to get to you, it really will. You have to fight off the urge to let things bother you. You have to just push it back and move forward. That's just the way that it is, unfortunately. But I remember being so peaceful up there. Everything seemed like it was great. You look back and you see that. Look at the world now. I mean, it's totally, totally different. It's like we have people, powers that be, demons, doing everything they can to make things as difficult as they possibly can, to make us as miserable as they possibly can. We probably all have those times in our life we can look back when things was great, and that was one of the times. Times was great. Things were simple. It was quiet. Like I said, I lived up there. Farthest neighbor was a long ways away in Kentucky. I was actually on the Tennessee side, but Kentucky was just right across, and then down the hill there, it was a long ways to the nearest neighbor, and I had peace and quiet. I could hear the train blowing when it came through the nearest town in Tennessee, but it wasn't loud. You had to be outside if you heard that. I remember during the winter time, I would sit there and I would be watching a VHS video extra, reading the book, reading the magazine. I liked to read at the time, Backwoodsman magazine. I still do, but I remember reading Backwoodsman magazine, and the fireplace, it was cold outside. The fireplace was popping. They had that fire going. To hear that fire popping, burning, keeping it warm. Living in that one room, it was pretty awesome. It really was. Quiet, peaceful, awesome. I remember one night that I forget what I was doing. I think I was reading a magazine, actually. I think I was reading The Backwoodsman, Fur Fishing Game, or something like that, what I was reading at the time. And I heard a animal outside making the awfulest sound I heard in my life. And so I went out, and I had horses up there then, and actually had one horse, but and had an electric fence around the pasture the horse was at, and there was a raccoon that had actually gotten on top of that lower strand of wire, and it was trying to cross, but when it got there, it got shocked and it couldn't move for some reason. It was afraid to move or something like that. And it had that wire across its stomach, and it was just laying there screaming like everything, trying to get loose. And that thing sounded awful. I mean, it really did. I felt sorry for it. But another night, I killed two copperheads in the yard, actually. I killed a rattlesnake in the yard. It was a lot of poisonous snakes up there. I had a pot-bellied pig up there, and I had to get rid of it because it was crazy. That thing was. You would go out in the yard and it would try to attack you. I mean, it was mean. It was, and it would root the yard up all the time and make a huge mess. I mean, it was. It was crazy. That thing was. My uncle gave it to me. My uncle Ricky gave it to me, and that thing was need to be a mental asylum. It was so crazy. I mean, it really was. But just so many things has changed. I mean, it really has. I remember one day I was up there, and my dad came up there with this old man. Jennings was his name, actually, Jennings. And he had a reputation of being an alcoholic. And my dad, he drunk a lot. He did a lot of things he shouldn't have done. But he came and birthed that old guy, and he had two bottles. He had beer in one hand, had whiskey in the other hand, and he would take a big gulp of whiskey, and he would take the beer to wash it on down with. I mean, and his face all the time was as red as a tomato. And he was so drunk that day. I mean, he would sit on the porch and he would drink that whiskey and drink that beer. And he would talk to my dog. He was lit. Actually, I don't think my dad was lit that day. He said lit quite a bit. But that old man, Jennings, he was drunk all the time. And he actually lived on the Tennessee side about 6 miles away from where I was at. It's crazy times, it really was. And I've been here thinking about, some of these things that happened up there and in my life in general. And I'm like, wow, man. So much has changed over the last 20 years, 25 years. Like I said, I'm 52 years old now, and I was in my early 20s then, so it's been like 25 years ago. And wow, if you look at now versus then, it's like, wow, how things has changed. So many people have passed away. So much is different. That's when I was listening to Kurt Saxon on the shortwave radio. Like I said, I didn't have any cable TV up there, nothing like that. It wasn't any satellite TV. Didn't have any internet. There wasn't any computers. I had electricity, 110 electricity, so I didn't have like a electric stove. I had to cook on a hot plate, cook in a little toaster oven, or cook outside, and no internet, no running water. The only utilities I had was electricity. So I had a light, and I could have a TV and a VCR playing. VCR. Most of you young people probably don't know what a VCR was. It was these big tapes that had. It's like a cassette tape. Well, it's something else. You probably don't know what it is. Anyway, it was ancient technology now. But you would go to video stores and you would rent different movies and things like that on VHS. And I would rent some of those. And so when I first started watching the UFC, actually, and they was coming out on VHS tapes then back when, Horace Gracie, Ken Shamrock was fighting. I would rent those, and I'd watch those on my VCR. And I had a small TV. It was probably a 15-inch TV. I would watch shortwave radio, books, magazines, fur fishing game, backwoodsman, backwoods home, Kurt Saxon radio show on shortwave, and that was my entertainment. And I lived up there, like I said, for about 2 years, and it was pretty awesome. I mean, like I said, I had horses, I had pigs, I had a lot of chickens. I would hunt, and I was in my early 20s. I would trap, and I grew some things up in the mountains to make extra money. I can't say what that was right now, but I grew a lot of that to make extra money, actually big fields of that at the time, and quite a bit of money doing that, actually. I supported myself doing that, but I had large fields, many different fields growing in different locations all over the woods. I will take care of that during the day, go home at night, watch VHS, listen to shortwave radio, read magazines. Pretty awesome, it really was. It was pretty awesome. Anyways, guys, I'm rambling on now. I was just sitting here thinking about all these things, and I decided to go ahead and just make this video and talk about it and tell you all about it and see what you all thought about it. Anyway, if you liked the video, give it a big thumbs up. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate you all being here and many subscribers. I'll see you guys next video, hopefully.